Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Now, Stella, you're a mental health professional. This, to me, is a very, very bold thing to come out and say. As I feel, in the past 10 years or so, we have moved so far, particularly here in the UK, about people being so open, like Perry, people in the public eye. We're really drawing attention to, I think, such an important issue. Does this sort of, diminish all of that?
I hope not. I don't want to diminish it. What I think is now that we've opened it and we've started the conversation, and maybe it is the last 10 years, certainly we talk about it an awful lot. I think it's really important now that we start to hone that conversation, because I think, sadly, that a lot of the conversations have made us more heightened and actually haven't done... We thought by talking about it, we were all going to talk about it, we had been hiding it under the rug, and then we were going to start talking about it and we were going to feel better. And then that kind of didn't happen. We were talking about it an awful lot and it seems to be getting worse. I'm not saying not to talk about it. I'm just saying that we need to talk about it more carefully.
Well, in a way, that's kind of a mixed message, because you're saying not to talk about it, but you're saying to talk about it more carefully. But you've said that it's over, talking about anxiety and everything, it's overused, right? Now, Emma, you completely disagree on that?
I completely disagree on that.
And you think we should continue to talk about it?
Well, I don't even think we've begun talking about it. I think people are acknowledging that we have mental health issues. We've got to distinguish that from mental illness. Let's look at mental health and looking after your mental health. Anxiety is a product of a busy society. We recognise that cortisol and adrenaline are consistently flooding our brain. It's quite hard to get the balance right. So the thing about recognising your anxiety is that's not enough. You then have to externalise that by conversing with somebody about that. Now, if you then get some help, great, but if not, at least you've started that journey.
Well, we've spent so much time, and we've done it on here. I've certainly been on this sofa and spoken about it, encouraging, urging people to talk, because it's so important. And with you, yourself, we've covered that so much. So to say we're doing it too much now.
I'm not saying we're doing it too much, we're doing it wrong. We're talking an awful lot.
So how should we be doing it?
Well, I'll just give you the classic idea that an awful lot of 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, they're talking about their anxiety, they're getting themselves into a state, they think by talking about it they're making themselves better, and actually they're heightening themselves and they're wrapping themselves in a feverish state.
You kind of think that they're talking themselves into...
I think they're talking themselves worse, making themselves worse. I think it's really important that we have to be careful about how we speak about it, so we don't make ourselves worse.
It says 1 in 8 5 to 19-year-olds had a mental disorder in 2017, and 1 in 20, that's 5%, meeting the criteria for 2 or more individual mental disorders. Do you think then, Emma, that we should be... Obviously, you don't, Stella, but do you think we should be encouraging young people to talk about it?
Absolutely. I don't think that children and young people who talk about their anxiety are fixating on it. I really don't, Stella. Actually, what I believe is that more and more we're failing to listen to young people and their anxiety. The system right now is pretty broken for kids. They're not going to be able to buy houses. They're dealing with issues like environmental politics and policies. They're not going to be able to necessarily have a job for life. We've got a blueprint of the world that used to work on a security level that's now failed. Of course, they're anxious. We need to draw that further. And one of the big things for me, and one of the things that I think that I was really interested when I read about some of the things you were saying, you were talking about slogans such as it's okay to not be okay. Now, one of the reasons that I take issue with the statements that you came up with is they're brilliant, but I haven't got a minute to stop and read it. The thing about a slogan, it's instantaneous. What do I need to know? Passing a busy tube when I'm 18. Something said it's good to talk. Something said it's okay not to be okay. Now I know that acknowledgement is that people are hearing me and listening to me, and if I call that number,
and it's
I'll get some
connecting
help.
the dots. Like you said, you gave the numbers there. Is a lot of young people, 19-year-olds, are using Instagram, are part of that. We are part of that generation. If that is what reaches them...
What if they're getting worse?
Isn't that positive? Well, and
it seems to be that they're getting worse.
Right.
I just want to say about it...
But how do you differentiate from... If you're saying that they're getting worse, how do you differentiate then from who is really suffering and who isn't? You can't all of a sudden turn people away, because you have to listen to everybody in order to make that decision.
I think it's incredibly important, and that mental health slogan, particularly it's good to talk or talk to somebody, I think is very important that we hone that message a little bit better, because I actually think there's nothing more demoralising and depressing in the world than talking to somebody when they're not a very good listener, when they don't really understand you, and when they kind of flippantly or casually dismiss you. I think that's actually dangerous, and I think we have to be very careful about who we talk to, because if you reveal your heart to somebody and they don't get it and they dismiss you, you can be left blindsided.
But also, you can't forge resilience, which is one of the big key things that you talk about, without acknowledging that some people reject you. And actually, that can be really helpful. Don't stop talking just because somebody's rubbish at listening.
Talk to the right person.
Yeah, but you can't talk to the right person because actually I don't have a family who listens to me. My doctor hasn't taken me seriously. I don't know who to talk to with my friends. So I talk to somebody, anybody, but that's better than not talking to somebody at all because it starts that journey. That's the key. I actually had a conversation last night with an organisation called Pals in Teesside. Now, in Teesside, they have the highest suicide rate for the under 40s in men. Highest, right? They're number 7 now. Why? They did one thing. They got men together to talk. They did it in pubs, they did it walking, choirs, they got people together. Those men, working class men, they weren't therapists, they didn't know how to talk about anxiety. Sometimes they were talking probably to the wrong person, but they were at least trying, and that's brought it down to number 7. That's a big deal.
You've said, Stella, that you feel like it's a bit of kind of the millennial thing and the snowflake generation.
I think it's actually, rather than just blaming the generation, I think it's our era right now that we're kind of nurturing emotions and we're, in a way, I think we're kind of sidelining the facts. Like Titania McGrath says, my facts don't care, my feelings don't care about your facts. That we need to be, I think we need to bring in our wise brain. I think we need to bring in rational, calm thought as well as our emotions. Being driven by our emotions doesn't mean that we're working at the best part of our brain. We're not.
But is that because now we're in 2019, this generation is out of that? And you know, my mum, for example, probably would have got ignored back then, and it wasn't okay to talk.
And that was awful.
But now you can.
Yeah, and isn't it great? And this generation of children, without a doubt, they don't feel that they've been suppressed. They don't feel that they can't speak. Most of them are very, very comfortable talking about their feelings, and I'm not convinced that they're getting worse. I'm not convinced that they're getting better.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to deal with.
As you can imagine, this has gone wild. Graham says we are absolutely a generation of snowflakes. However, mental health has nothing to do with it, and I think it's disrespectful comparing the two.
And Amy says, for many, stress, anxiety, and other mental health issues are very real. Let's not push talking about them back underground.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, when we're thinking about the kind of comments there and the idea that young people are snowflakes, no, they're not. They're living in the most challenged experience in society today. They have so many pressures, and I'm so tired of hearing the rhetoric of the older generation saying, you need to know more, do more, be more. But actually, these guys, they're out there trying to change the world a little bit.
Do you think, you know, because, like, for instance, you know, Perry saying last night on social media...
so brave.
Right, but...
And really responsible.
Yeah, no, and I think that is awesome also. But do you not also think that social media plays into a big part of the anxiety, of the stress for that
Me and Stella would agree fully on that without a doubt, wouldn't we?
Oh, we found something.
Yeah. No, we would. And it's fine to disagree, but, you know, we would agree with that. You would agree with that. That, you know,
without a doubt,
but equally, social media can play a huge part in connecting people. When my uncle was a young homosexual male, it was illegal.
Yes.
He felt like he was ostracised and offered ECT. These days, he would click on the few buttons and he'd realise he was completely normal.
Exactly that.
But I'm not for a moment saying we shouldn't talk about it. I'm saying we should talk about it with care and consideration and thoughtfulness and not make people more emotional.
But that is a middle-class perspective, though, isn't it? No, it is. Young people.
Well, they're going to continue to discuss, and if you want to hear more of Stella's, or you'd like to read more about it, the book is right here. You can get that, and they're having a nice discussion, and we're going to head on, aren't we?
Leave them to do that. It's the break, right?